Warning, this episode contains brain food that will lead to improved emotional and social intelligence. Hello and welcome to our new short format servings of consciously prepared brain food designed to improve your mental fitness. This is Lisa Cypers-Kamen, your host. For more than 12 years, we've been proudly and consistently crafting harvesting happiness and sharing it with you. Each week, we spotlight diverse thinkers and doers who are contemporary trendsetters and change agents devoting their lives to creating a better world in which to live. We invite you to listen up and change the way you think about human happiness. Our award-winning content is fresh, optimistic, and purpose-driven media that promotes well-being from the inside out. Alrighty then, let's dive in. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for joining me on today's show, where you will learn about mothering ourselves, healing primal wounds to stand proud. My guest today is Bethany E. Webster. She is a writer, international speaker, and transformational coach. Bethany started blogging in 2013 about the mother wound and quickly experienced worldwide demand for her work, blending research on intergenerational trauma, feminist theory, and psychology with her own personal story. Webster's work is the result of decades of research and her own journey of healing. Bethany Webster speaks, consults, and mentors around the world, sharing her growing body of work, which is raising the standard of women's leadership and personal development. She is the author of Discovering the Inner Mother, a guide to healing the mother wound and claiming your personal power. Welcome to the show, Bethany. Thank you so much for being with me today.
It's great to be here, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, this is a subject that I think many of our listeners could relate to. And I would love for you to, first of all, for those who don't know what the mother wound is, define it for us.
Yes, as I define it, the mother wound is the pain that we carry from our relationship with our mothers, which comes from many sources. One is whatever unhealed traumatic childhood wounds our mothers carry that haven't been healed yet, and the trauma of being a woman in this culture. And the mother wound really has a wider lens as I teach about it. And the wider lens is that we live in a culture, many of us all around the world live in these cultures that tell women that they're less than. And this cultural attitude kind of filters through mother-daughter dynamics and making it really tough for mothers to, encourage their daughters to thrive and to break boundaries and to be trailblazers when they themselves haven't felt that permission for whatever reason, either from their own family or just from the cultural mandates that they have struggled with. So what often happens is that mothers, in the best of situations, they pass on some beliefs that they want to protect their daughters. In the worst of situations, sometimes mothers pass down the mother wound out of their own pain that they haven't dealt with. So this is a really powerful topic because, number one, it's not about blaming our mothers or making them wrong. It's really about radical responsibility because we're dealing with the blueprint of self, in those earliest, minutes and hours and days and months of our lives. Mother was our body. Mother was world. Mother was self. So whatever we absorbed from our mothers in those early stages of our lives really has a long-lasting impact and shapes the way that we see not only ourselves and our bodies and our worth and our potential, but also the world at large and how we relate to other people as well.
I love the fact that your work explores the mother wound through both the micro and macro lens, right? That it's about a sense of self and then a sense of self within society as being female.
Exactly.
And this is really important because I think that we often speak about the mother wound as it relates to us as individual female. Mm-hmm. And the impact is much greater than that.
It really is. It really touches everything. It's really the intersection between our human needs for love, safety, and belonging in those early stages of our lives as it relates to the larger cultural impacts of, the ways that we project our pain, basically. And are living at this really critical juncture in human history where we're seeing a lot of the values, the worldviews, the beliefs that have been passed down for many generations and embodied in many institutions that we consider, foundations of our society. We are seeing these values inherited worldview, so to speak, becoming obsolete, becoming problematic, no longer tenable. And we're seeing that we need to do something different. We need to see things differently. So it's a powerful time to not only be confronted with the world situation of global uncertainty in many areas, but also to feel internally that we're confronted with in our own personal lives. How are these beliefs just not working anymore? And what's the wider lens that we need to take so that we can shift things for the future?
Let's go back to the premise of the mother wound. And I think it's fair to say that there are very few mothers on the planet that would agree that they set out to harm their children.
Totally. Nobody sets out for that, I don't think.
Nobody's motherhood journey, whether mothering children or through families of choice or blended families, I think that we all might be lacking in some areas based upon our own experiences, right? Our own lived experiences, and unwittingly pass on some of this generational trauma, right, to our offspring.
Yes.
That's the dilemma. But then the solution is in what your book proposes, discovering the inner mother and beginning to, take responsibility for the healing of this.
Exactly. And I've seen some really inspiring things happen, both, in my students and the clients that I coach around this. What often happens is the child inside the mother really plays a big role. So if you're a mom, your inner child has a mediating role with how you show up with your child. So for example, if you grew up as a child, a daughter in a family where you didn't have a voice, you were kind of growing up in that, children are seen and not heard. Maybe you felt you had to be small and silent or agreeable or people pleasing. That child in you that didn't have a voice, that didn't get to be seen for herself, as I'm sure many of mothers listening can relate to, you can get triggered by your own children, right? But through the process. And so
a lot of head shaking going on, Bethany.
Yes. And that's totally normal. It's normal for us to, triggers show us where the healing's needed. And what I wanted to portray with the book is that we can mother that child inside of us in the ways that we needed when we were little girls. And in so doing that, we take a burden off the next generation. We stop projecting unconsciously either anger or sadness or, disappointment about our own situation onto, our daughters. So it's a really powerful process where, we basically break the cycle in kind of a literal way, because when this stuff is not conscious, it just repeats. We might even hear our mother's voice come out of our own mouths with the children. We might feel jealous of our daughters. We might, I'm not a mother, but I work with a lot of mothers. And I think actually my not being a mother is really helpful, because what I do, the healing really happens at the level of the daughter.
Yeah.
It can't happen at the mother level. The way you mother is related to how you were mothered. So that's the point of power, so to speak.
Can we talk a little bit about the types of issues that present themselves when we are contending with a mother wound? Because, a lot of us might recognize them, but some of us might not, and might not be aware of how this manifests as adults.
Sure. So the mother wound is something that lives inside of us, and it's on a spectrum, right? So some of us might have it on the more severe end of the spectrum. Some of us might have a minor one. We all have to contend with the cultural mother wound, which is that women are less than. But the way that shows up personally is with our own mothers. So in our interactions with them. So it could be, we feel stressed out about our relationship with our mothers. It feels like something we have to endure. We might feel the struggle of, oh my gosh, how much can I give her? We might struggle with guilt about, boundaries, needing boundaries, having our own voices and limits with our relationship with our moms. Our moms might expect a lot of us. Our moms might have gone through incredible hardship. And so we might feel that there's a hole there that she needs filled. And it's like, well, what's my role in my mother's happiness. Some of our mothers grew up making us feel responsible for them, or just out of compassion for them. Many of us want to lighten her load, but that can be a slippery slope. It's like, what's mine and what's my mother's? So there's that aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is the mother wound that lives in us. So the way that we talk to ourselves, the way we relate to ourselves, how is that inner narrative going in your head? Is it negative? Is it repeating your mother's voice? Is it cutting you down to size? Is it truncating your dreams? So a lot of the ways that we talk to ourselves often can be the way our mothers talk to us, and it can be really overt. So many of us, I think, struggle with either neglect, like severe neglect from our mothers, not feeling connected, not feeling wanted. And the other side of the spectrum, some women really struggle with enmeshment and codependency.
Yep, that's where I was going. That was my next question. Do you recognize the signs of codependency in this dynamic,
Well, yes, exactly. And there's a cultural reason for this. I mean, personal and cultural. The cultural one is when a daughter grows up, there's not much encouragement for her to be her own person, to individuate, to be individual, to blaze her own trail, as opposed to boys that are more so conditioned to, blaze their own trail, do their own thing, be a leader, take control. That's more of a socially conditioned male thing. Women are more conditioned to kind of stay very connected with their mothers, from childhood all the way through their death, so there's not a lot of cultural support or modeling for what it means to be a truly self-actualized individual woman in relationship with your mother. So, if you go beyond that kind of enmeshment, that's very normal and common, there's a lot of social drawbacks to that. I mean, it's a taboo, even what we're talking about right now, for many people to even admit that they might feel anger or disappointment or a lot of pain in relationship to their mothers. Mothers are either idealized or denigrated. It's a very black or white wounded relationship that the culture has with mothers. So if we don't fall into the idealized mom is everything, she's the best, she's next to God, then we run the risk of being shamed by other people. So that's a block that a lot of people face and keeps them from doing this deeper work that can really liberate them.
And I think for many people, the challenge with the mother wound or the adult relationship with mom is in the individuation of, wait a second, I'm a 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old woman or man, and my mother, or in some cases my father, right, don't really see me as this responsible adult that's really capable of leading my own life. And there's a lack of fundamental respect.
Totally.
For that person as that separate and whole individual.
That's so common. I'm so glad you gave voice to that. And it was really, it's very eloquently how you described it, very eloquently.
I've been thinking about this one a lot.
Well, yeah. And the reason why this is, it's a real tragedy, but a lot of our mothers and grandmothers, for those of us who are like, in our 30s, 40s, 50s and up, a lot of the older generations, the mothers, experienced a lot of deprivation. There wasn't a lot of support to be your own person. So there's a real deprivation that many of these older mothers and grandmothers and aunts, struggle with, and they can't help it. I don't think they can help themselves. It's just a sadness or a resentment or a sense of a loss that hasn't been processed within them. There hasn't been a repair or a reckoning within them about their situation. So that bleeds out onto our interactions with them. It might be like making us feel guilty, a kind of martyr complex or victim energy that you can't fix that. That's something that they can, only they can fix that. That is not your job to fix it.
And yet it can create a lot of static. We're going to need to take a break. And when we come back, we will continue the conversation with my guest today, Bethany E. Webster. We're talking about her book, Discovering the Inner Mother, A Guide to Healing the Mother Wound and Claiming Your Personal Power. To connect with Bethany, please do so at her website, which is bethanywebster.com, on Twitter at Bethany Webster with the number 8, on Facebook, Healing the Mother Wound, and on Instagram, The Mother Wound. Here comes the pause. We'll be right back, and that is a promise. Each day we have the intellectual freedom to be happy or the liberty to be miserable regardless of external circumstance. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health, urge them to seek professional support because good psychological health is vital in achieving a satisfying life. Visit harvestinghappiness.com for psychosocial educational resources to boost emotional and social intelligence. Like what you hear on Harvesting Happiness? Sharing is caring. Pay it forward by spreading the word to your tribe through social media. Find us at Harvesting Happiness on Facebook and me at Lisa Kamen on Twitter. And we're back continuing the conversation with Bethany E. Webster. We're talking about mothering ourselves, healing primal wounds to stand proud. Let's get back to it. So Bethany, let's talk a little bit about what happens to us as adults. And we have a sense of frustration, not so much about what's happened in the past with our mothers or our parents, but what's happening in the present, like a fundamental misfire or miscommunication of roles.
Yes, something that happens a lot in terms of present day stresses with our adult, we're adults and with our mothers, is that our mothers can often treat us as though we're still children, still incapable, still needing her help, still, not fully responsible adults. So there's a lack of respect that we can feel from our mothers as adults. And the reason why this happens, and it's very common, is because for many of our mothers and grandmothers, women of the past, previous generations, there's a real sense that motherhood and being a mother is their primary place of power and importance. So for them to truly see you as an adult woman with, all of your courage and power and all of your achievements and all of your, capacities, which is great, an amazing thing, like all the things that you're proud of, a lot of mothers would experience that as a loss of power and a loss of relevance because it puts you at an equal, more of a peer type of relationship. And that's what a healthy, when we become adults, that's what we kind of wish for with our mothers, is that we can have a new kind of dynamic that's more of a peer relationship where there's no longer this power dynamic of she's the parent and you're the child. And that's a lovely blossoming of a healthy mother-child relationship. But for many of us, it would be too much of a loss for our mothers because they don't have a fully developed selfhood. Like, back in the day, that wasn't something that was encouraged or looked upon as amazing the way it is today.
And it is interesting when we are caught between that space of that mother wound with our own mothers, and then we have the relationship with daughters and other women in our lives that is completely the opposite. And I guess therein lies the opportunity for the healing. We can't go backwards, but we can move forward and model different behaviors.
Yes. And we also have to do one other thing, which is accept that our mothers cannot or won't change, right? We can model from here to the moon and back, but if our mothers are not seeing the need or the desire, or they're too scared to look within, what our mothers are showing us are their best. This is her best, and she can't be different. So there's a grieving process as well, where we stop taking it personally. Number one, that she treats us the way she does. Maybe it's a one-up, a mother who thinks, oh, she feels powerful when I feel like crap. That's a common thing, more common than you think. But we start to take it less personally, right? So we take it less personally. We see that's where she's at, has nothing to do with me. And then the other thing is that we stop making our happiness contingent upon her changing or becoming different. A lot of us have this desire from childhood when things were really tough that, one day I'm going to be good enough for my mom and she's going to finally see me and finally get me. And like, we're going to have this great relationship one day. That's kind of a survival mechanism. I call the impossible dream that one can take long into adulthood. And it's something we can grieve and let go of, and actually need to do that to make peace, not only with our power and our own potential, but also with our mother's limitations and where that is, so that it becomes less of a charge. It takes up less space in our lives. It's no longer exhausting. It's just what is.
Yeah. And that's a big one, I think, for many of us. A really big sticking point. And I think that once we can grieve and release that loss, or the loss of how we want it to be, or the expectation or that desire, we can feel lighter.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that is most definitely an upside. And then what happens to us internally? Like, where do we go from there when we're able to let go of that dream or that desire or wanting it to be so different, and we step into that place of being able to offer some of that to ourselves? Then what do we do with it?
Yeah, it's actually, giving up that impossible dream that I just described. A part of that is that we turn towards the little girl inside of us that wants that relationship with our moms, and we become the mother that we wanted to ourselves. So that has to happen. In order to let go of mom, the child in us needs that connection and support with a loving adult woman, right? And we become the mother to ourselves. And that's a practice that, we kind of deepen and create a bond over time. And what that does is it helps us to really feel a sense of sovereignty and power within ourselves that isn't dependent on external validation, everybody liking us or having to please everyone. We become more comfortable with bucking the crowd, saying no, more in touch with our authentic selves. We feel that permission and that safety, really. It's an inner safety to be real. And I think that's what all of us are wanting,
I like that, the inner safety to be real. And that's a challenge for some people.
It is, because so many of us, whatever our limitations our parents had, bless them, they did the best they could, but we hold the legacy of their whatever they couldn't give us. It haunts us still. And we see it in the recycling problems we have in relationships, problems in career. I call it the invisible fence. It's something that we stay confined in without realizing it. So this is really how we kind of break out of that invisible fence, by really loving ourselves unconditionally. It's all about self-love. It's all about giving ourselves that unconditional support and compassion. Because many of us grew up in homes where there were definite rules. There was like power over dynamics, putting down, or just a subtle, your voice isn't okay here, or your emotions aren't okay here. And if you do express emotions, you're dismissed, you're shamed, humiliated. A lot of us experienced a lot of this stuff because our parents didn't have the skills yet on how to welcome emotions, how to process them themselves. It was all about obedience and compliance, which really kills a child's spirit. So we have to go back and get that spirit and re-anoint the very things that we were shamed for.
That is so beautifully said. the re-anointment.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. And let's talk about the questioning of mother. You talk in your book, The Discovering the Inner Mother, about boundaries and the taboo of questioning mother. And I think this is something that as children, even adult children, we like to be in a state of curiosity. Our nature is to question.
Yeah, exactly. Our nature is to question. And I don't know if you've, felt it as a child. As I know I definitely felt it as a teenager, especially, was wanting, questioning my mom, wanting more from her, wanting, feeling that gap. You call it the mother gap, of the gap between what we needed and wanted from our mothers and what we actually received. So, but we have this cultural taboo that we should never question our mothers, and that to do that means that we're ungrateful and we're bad people if we question our moms, if we admit that we have any feelings besides love, but that is precisely that questioning, that natural curiosity and wanting to know and wanting to heal, and wanting to understand, really, that there's no shame in that. And we should welcome that. That's a healthy thing. But our parents didn't have the emotional resilience to handle that because it was shut down so early with them.
Well, it's the emotional resilience, nor necessarily possessing the social and emotional intelligence, because
exactly
that part of the curiosity was not something that was fostered, or nurtured in their lives. And yet, as adult children wanting to go back and have repair of parts of that relationship, I can see where that creates a little bit of static.
Well, it's really a differentiation of worldviews. For older generations, it's disrespectful to talk about things that are not comfortable. because there's a power dynamic, right?
Is that what it is?
Think about it. It's like for people that haven't done a lot of work on themselves, who don't have a lot of self-awareness or insight into their childhood history, they tend to rely on roles as ways to role-place living. Like, I'm the mother, so my reality trumps yours, or I'm the father, so what you said to me doesn't make sense. Don't even talk back to me. And it's sad because that's the very kind of thing that cuts connection, right?
Yep.
And so we're living in now in a very different world where we're coming to the terms with the fact that we have to do this inner work, or else it's just going to perpetuate more and more suffering. So people have a hunger to understand trauma and to understand, but this is recent. Like, it wasn't until the 50s, Dr. Spock, I think, who said, we got to look at the child's individual needs and feelings. Before that, it was just like physical care. Like, the physical care was it.
Basic needs.
Yeah. Like shelter, food, and clothing.
Yeah.
Now we know that the emotional needs of children are equally as important to their development as physical, if not more so. So it's a very different worldview. So I think this cultural divide, I want to say generational divide, it's very different between generations right now. And some people of the older generations are willing, like, they want to learn, they value the connection with their adult children enough that they want to grow, learn about boundaries, they can flow with it. Some, though, there's other parents out there of adult children who simply cannot go beyond the power dynamic. And sometimes that leads to no contact or estrangement. And so you can't know at the outset which way it's going to go. You can only trust that as you go through your own healing process, that it's going to be better for everyone, whatever the outcome is.
Whoa, this is a lot to take in and a lot to think about. And there's so much more in Bethany Webster's book, Discovering the Inner Mother, A Guide to Healing the Mother Wound and Claiming Your Personal Power. This has been really very eye-opening, because I think many of us have the thoughts about what this is without necessarily putting your finger on it and identifying this sort of level of a very primal wound or experience.
Yes, it's I'd say the primal wound inside the mother wound is, I'm bad. I'm a bad person. There's something wrong with me. And when we do the mothering work, the inner mothering work, which is a practice that I teach in my course, you really start to repair that wound, where you can start to actually get in touch with your goodness, that you at your essence are actually pure goodness. And you always have been, and your worth can't be earned, and you don't have to prove it to anyone. This starts to become a living reality that you get back in touch with as you heal the mother wound. And it's very profound.
To learn more, please visit BethanyWebster.com. On Twitter, you can find her at Bethany Webster, the number 8. On Facebook, Healing the Mother Wound. And on Instagram, The Mother Wound. Bethany, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed this conversation and hope that it provides food for thought for our listeners to look in the mirror and look beyond the relationship to see what's really underneath it all, which then hopefully activates empathy and compassion and love.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Harvesting Happiness today. This is Lisa Cypers-Kamen on behalf of my guest, Bethany E. Webster, wishing you kind thoughts, kinder words, and the kindest of actions. Until next time, remember, happiness is an inside job. Happiness is your inside job. Please go out and rock your day, and remember to be kind to one another. Keep harvesting your own happiness anytime and anywhere from the comfort of wherever you are. Subscribe, listen, and share hundreds of downloadable episodes from our mental muscle toning libraries at harvestinghappinesstalkradio.com, toginet.com, iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about my global consulting services, please visit harvestinghappiness.com. Spread more joy by liking us on Facebook at Harvesting Happiness and following me on Twitter at Lisa Kamen. Harvesting Happiness is produced by me, Lisa Cypers-Kamen, Andrea Mengele, Robin Boyd, Andrea Daly, and the awesome team at Podfly Productions, including Eric Begay, Kimberly Beck, and Alec Gus, in collaboration with TogiNet Radio, KBUU, RadioMalibu.net, and is available on PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.